Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Talk to the Fedora, chatting about hard-hitting, honest entrepreneur wisdom that you can use to grow your small business. I'm your host, Jarrod Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events, and today we're very pleased to be welcoming Eric Saumure. Eric is recognized as a chartered accountant and chartered professional accountant in Canada. After redeveloping a few properties while attending university, he then incorporated Bytown Living to house his investments. I don't know if you caught that pun, but it's a smart one. He's worked with small to large clients through his role at KPMG LLP, one of Canada's big four accounting firms. Eric has spent some time with the Canada Revenue Agency, as well as management in the private sector. Eric now helps small and medium business owners minimize pesky paperwork and financial headaches using cloud-based technology software, SaaS. Since 2017, Eric has been the principal accountant at Zen Books. He's recently been recognized for various awards in his community, including the KPMG Region's East Community Leader and as Volunteer Ottawa's Best Volunteer in the professional field. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jarrod.
So, Eric, let's start a little bit. That's quite an impressive background. Let's dive into a little bit more about that. What are you all about, and how did Zen Books come into your world?
Yeah. What am I all about? All about small businesses, the tax. We were talking about tax a little bit earlier, and that's my jam. I kind of head up the tax side of things as well. So small business, helping out in the community through volunteering and just doing what we can for small businesses in the Ottawa and area and throughout Canada.
You know what? A lot of small business owners, in particular, they don't have the resources for a whole, outsized outsourcing accounting firm. And so, why did Zen Books start, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, so honestly, like the traditional firm are just not built to help the traditional small business. So typically the traditional firm kind of talks to you at the end of the year and they kind of summarize what you probably already know for your financials. Whereas now we have access to cloud-based tools that give us your financials on a weekly or monthly
Mm.
basis. And so we can actually add value on a weekly or monthly basis. And so we're kind of just taking advantage of that software opportunity to be able to provide that kind of level of service that small business owners realistically need.
Right. So you're using like today's technology to give people real time snapshots of their financials. That's for
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so important. I think a lot of entrepreneurs that they're so busy working on a thousand other things that they don't want to become accountants or bookkeepers, and they want to pass that off. But we do need to have an understanding of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, most business owners are just like over their head with all the paperwork and annoyances of being a business owner. So, there are a bunch of inexpensive apps out there that really help minimize like physical paper and just help make life a little bit more zen. So, yeah.
Yeah, love it. Do you have a background in entrepreneurship or business?
Yeah, so I mean, I did my honors BCom specialization in accounting at University of Ottawa. I mean, I did accounting at Algonquin College as well, and so
Mhm.
there's kind of a background there in business, but that's the kind of theory side. Growing up, I used to sell popcorn in high school at events and stuff as Eric's Popcorn business, which people might be able to find on Google still, but I also was selling some candy out of my locker. I was kind of like the entrepreneur of type. And yeah, so there was always that in my blood. So when there was an opportunity that came up to do Zen Books, it was yeah, I jumped on it for sure.
That's very cool. I mean, it makes you more well-rounded, not only as an accountant, but I'm sure you could appreciate some of the struggles that small business owners face.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they wear so many hats, and it's insane. Like you could be smart technically, but that really doesn't matter that much, like from an operational perspective for a business.
Sure. Well, you had me at hats. So talking about challenges, what about you and Zen Books? Like you guys have been around since what, about 2017.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the adapting that you guys have done, and then perhaps talk about some of the work-life balance that you're dealing with during COVID or prior.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, we've had a few, I'm going to say lessons learned. We're kind of the type to try things out, see if it works, and then move on. There's kind of the theory you can kind of look up, but at some points we were, digging and crawling for business, and so we were going on Kijiji, we were responding to job ads, and that was a terrible idea. And then we'd even like we had organized, or I had organized some events when I was in college, and some of them were great, some of them just it really flopped with like literally zero people attending, and so that's pretty embarrassing. And all kinds of social media testing, right? You put like A, B, C testing, and so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think the biggest thing for us through our growth has been understanding the impact of team culture, and how team culture is unbelievably more important than any individual's performance. Like regardless of their individual performance, if there's not a good fit, that impacts everyone else, right? And you just don't want that. And so that was one of the big lessons learned for us.
Yeah, that's really important. You go down one path. If it works, great. You do more of it. If not, you change. You move on.
Hmm.
Yeah. And moving on means working with people, finding clients, working with your team, finding collaborations. How important is the concept of collaboration to yourself or ZenBooks?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, especially when you're working from home, collaboration is actually so much more important. So,
Mhm.
you can easily be stuck in your own house, literally physically on your own, and you feel very isolated, right? So because our team, everybody works remotely, they are at home and they're physically alone. So we need to collaborate so that people feel like they're part of a team. We're bouncing ideas. So especially with tax planning stuff, we always have sessions, brainstorming sessions. We have weekly chats about just mind melding sessions where we just go through our client challenges to see who has a better solution to our challenge. We have tech stack discussions where we're just discussing technology regularly. So we have to, in a way, force that social or that collaboration by having those regularly scheduled meetings, whereas traditionally in a in-person office that kind of happens over the water cooler, or like when you're coming in or after a meeting. So we have to kind of structure it. Yeah.
Yeah, so being much more aware of the time constraints. Okay, everybody, every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, we're going to have our weekly drop in, virtual,
Hmm.
perhaps, or
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, that's important. And this leads to the next question, Eric, about networking. I mean, there's no doubt, COVID's taken a hit on the concept of networking. How have you approached it? Do you have any networking tips, either virtual or in person, that you would like to share?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm all about creating strong connections. So when there's a physical, like when there's an actual event going on, my number one tip that I like to share is that it's not about how many people you meet in an evening, but it's about creating one or two strong connections from that event. And so if you're going to one event a week, that's 50 to 100 strong connections that you make in that year. And so having weak, just very high level connections, people forget about this, and like you're not actually going to share business or whatnot. And so work at like actually making a strong connection with few people. And so surprisingly, that's worked quite well over like a remote kind of like environment, because basically we try and see who might be a good fit for us to work with.
Hmm.
And then it's like schedule some like direct chat, and like let's get to know each other through a 30-minute one, like or a 60-minute kind of conversation, see what I can do for them, and then really build that like good connection. We see it as like an elastic band, right? Like if you have an elastic band and it's a newer one, it's not great, but the more you use it, the better it becomes. And so you need to create those connections and use and exchange business and work with them to make your connections stronger.
That's a really good analogy. I've never heard it put like that, with as an elastic. Yeah, I mean, if you don't nurture it, it's going to shrink.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really
Or if you
smart.
try and stretch it too early, it breaks,
Yeah,
like and that's not what you want in a relationship.
yeah, and to me, stretching it is, give me this, give me this. Can you connect me with so and so?
Yeah,
Always asking rather than giving.
exactly.
Yeah, you also mentioned the concept of trying to get to know a few people rather than all the people at one event.
Hmm.
as a little backgrounder, I used to do that years ago when I first started networking, Eric. I would go around and try to meet everybody in the room thinking, oh, this is what networking is. I got to go connect with everybody. And it took a long time, and I call it networking maturity.
Mm.
That, yeah, you don't have to meet the 50 people. If you meet 3 good ones and you spend 45 minutes talking to them, it's going to pay off in the future. But you've already realized that. That's excellent. And that's a very good tip. Thank you.
Mm.
What about branding tips? I know that, we'll talk a bit about the Zen Books Awards shortly, but what about how are you branding Zen Books?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so for us, like we went through a it's almost a philosophical kind of like, thought experiment about branding and like what is the brand and all of that. And so I think it comes down to like, the honest truths of yourselves and like, trying to figure out if nobody nobody is impacting this brand other than the employees and the owners, right? So what do we want it to be? And so I think in branding, the most important things for us have been about being clear and concise, so not making a confusing message, being consistent. So those are the big 3 things. I think we do a lot of valuations for businesses, so we help with like the value of a business, and so most businesses underappreciate the value of branding, and essentially they often see branding as like marketing, right, which is a completely different thing. You don't branding is not a pay-per-click kind of like advertising system here. Like it's about just getting in front of people so that people know who you are and know what feeling is associated with your brand. And that is worth an unbelievable amount, because the way we've approached our business development is essentially we want people to have heard of Zen Books. And then basically when when they need an accountant, they might not go to Zen Books, but what they'll do is they'll ask their friends and say, who do you think I should work with? And then they'll hear, Bob the accountant, Steve the accountant, Brenda the accountant, and then Zen Books, and they'll be like, hey, Zen Books, I've heard of them. And as soon as they've heard of them, that's where they will follow up. And so that's what we work on, is just kind of a brand awareness, because most of our business comes from referrals.
Yeah.
So if someone's referring us and they've heard of us, that's a winner. That's where we get their business, because it's one thing to have our name exchanged from as a referral side, but if they've heard of us externally from that referral, that creates a good client relationship.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, if you hear it from 2 or 3 different people, you see the brand on social media once in a while, you see them at an event, it builds that credibility over the time.
Hmm.
And let's talk about some of the organizations you or Zen Books are part of. Like, are there any community groups or entrepreneur groups that you find useful in the city?
Yeah, I mean, so we're part of the Ottawa Board of Trade, which is instrumental in the Ottawa area. We certainly do events through them, and they've been great. We also are part of like some of the CRA volunteer programs. So we did the tax returns for healthcare workers for the last couple of years as well. And also each of our employees have their own personal volunteering that we support,
Mhm.
and sometimes donate to as well. Yeah.
That's really nice, like, to support some of the initiatives that your staff are
Hmm.
take to heart. That speaks volumes. That's really important. Let's talk a little bit about money tips. Okay, you guys are accountants. We get it. We're not going to go into the weeds here, Eric. But
Yeah.
like, as an entrepreneur, a small business owner, most people, they may or may not have money sense. But when you're
Mm.
balancing, we just got out of tax season. Talking about, how do money tips? Like, do you have any to
Yeah.
share?
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things I had to kind of think about this a little bit here, but essentially businesses sometimes approach us and they explain that they have a cash flow problem, right? And the reality is that most people who have a cash flow problem don't have a cash flow problem. They have a profitability problem.
Hmm.
Create a profitable business and you won't have cash flow problems. And people kind of confuse the two. So basically, if you create a profitable business, then it's all about delaying gratification, and therefore you won't have cash flow problems. So the main focus is not a cash flow problem. It's creating a profitable business, and then a personal delaying of gratification in order to not have cash flow problems.
What
So
does that
that's
mean
that's the
to you,
mindset
the
change.
delaying of gratification?
Yeah, so that's just basically not giving yourself a huge salary at the beginning, not buying into the super expensive laptops at the beginning, kind of being cheap at the beginning until your profitability goes up. And basically, oftentimes business owners see the money in their bank account and then they'll spend it because it's a good ROI in the long term, right? Like that makes sense sometimes. And the thing is, just do that a few months later. Like delay that purchase
Mm,
so that you have more cash reserves. Because essentially, the biggest thing that small business owners refuse or kind of like create themselves so much trouble with is not having proper cash reserves. So a cash reserve is just created by having that same profit just a few extra months
yeah.
and putting that money aside and then doing your growth plans, right? And so by having that 2 to 4 months, depending on the type of revenue you have of cash reserves, that is what causes business owners to be able to make the right decisions in the long term, right? Because that's where you can start to make those decisions on getting those annual rates on software instead of the monthly software. And then that you're saving a 10% by having that cash, right? You can actually afford to have quality laptops that will actually last you twice as long if you pay 10% more, right? Like, but you shouldn't do that at the beginning because you need to build that cash reserve, and then you can make the right long-term decisions when you have that cash reserve. So whenever an opportunity comes up for a small business to shift into a new profitable line of business, that can be done because they have the cash reserve. But if they don't have that, they can't change into the more profitable line of business. They can't invest into senior staff if they don't have that cash reserve when the opportunity presents itself, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so you need to kind of time those opportunities, and you can't do that if you don't have the cash reserve to be able to make those decisions at the perfect moment.
Yeah. Like my father says, make hay when the sun shines, but don't buy a brand new horse just because you have the hay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Eric, let's talk about concept of processes. There's
Yeah.
no doubt that small business owners, there are, like you said, a million hats people have to wear. But how would you go about streamlining some of these many processes that entrepreneurs need to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is to write down everything that you do as a business owner, which is a big kind of job description.
Yeah.
And then from there, you start to detail out what you do to simplify your life, right? So some great examples that have made a huge, I call it a ROTI, return on time invested,
Yeah.
it is basically on your scheduling. So we use Calendly, you pay a couple, I think it's $20, $15 a month. And basically you get a link that goes into your calendar. So you send people your link and people can just choose a time that works for them and it goes directly in your calendar. And so basically you don't have to go back and forth and take like a few minutes on every meeting just to figure out when's a good time to connect, right? So that's a quick little thing, right? Um, I think just figuring out like the business development process. So knowing like, do you just figure it out when you're having a new client approach you, or do you have a whole process that says these are the questions I should ask? This is a standard pricing model,
Mhm.
and basically that helps enormously. One of the things that processes do for business owners as well is just reduce the level of energy required to run a business. And so I think that that's a big concept that people are going to explore further into the future. But people often look at time management, and I think it's a lot more about energy management, because to do something for an hour that's mundane is very different than doing something that requires a lot of thought and energy and just mental focus for that 1 hour, right?
Mhm.
And so it's about managing your energy throughout the day. And by having a proper process where you're not scrambling to say, what are my questions that I should ask this person? Like if that's all documented, you can go in and it's not that draining to just say, okay, next question, cool. This is, and you're reassured that you're doing things according to a plan and you're not forgetting any questions and you're not stressed out. You've done it a million times, and it's less stressful and less energy draining. Yeah.
What was that acronym again? ROTI?
ROTI, yeah, return on time invested. So ROI is like return on investment, but return on time invested.
That's important. I mean, the
So
next question was time management skills, and you mentioned the Calendly option. I'm sure there are others as well. Uh, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Zapier is a big thing. So Zapier, basically you can connect, your Google Calendar with Zoom, or you can, auto email people after they've paid an invoice. You can, there's all kinds of automations that you can create through Zapier that connect with other open API software. And Zapier is free for the first few kind of transactions, and after that, it's a relatively low fee, and that helps with just automation of your practice or your
it boggles my mind when once in a while I meet somebody and they said, when we really start talking about, in depth, how they run their business, and I'm an open book, I share as well,
yeah.
and like, did you manually type this email back to me? And you do that for every person? And she writes, yeah. Like, oh my, really? Well, let me change the way you do your business. Write it once, have it in a Word document, copy and paste it when you need it, and
Yeah.
then you just tweak it every time. To me, that's processes. But sometimes
Yeah.
when I say, what do you do? I'm working my processes. It just goes right over their head. It's it really is
Yeah,
an
I mean,
important part.
I I'd say even better, like for us, like after someone pays one of our bills, they automatically get an email from me that asks for a review on our Google review page. And it's, you don't need to copy paste, like it's done through Zapier. It's just an automation thing. I don't even need to think about it anymore. It's just done automatically, right? So save even more time.
That that's another great piece of wisdom right there, Eric. Let's talk about some successes, either personally or professionally, that you're most proud of.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like throughout the pandemic, I think we were just overall fortunate compared to other business owners, because we were working remotely already, and we're helping businesses become remote with their financials. So basically, we did get a lot of calls from various business owners who were in very dire situations saying, am I eligible for any of the grants? Like,
Mhm.
and they're not clients. They're just calling in saying, I'm going to have to close my business unless you can find somehow a grant that'll keep us alive, and so we donated so many hours on helping do this, because we offered to provide second opinions for any business owner
Mhm.
on these grants. And so yeah, we donated an enormous amount of time on those calls, and I don't think we generated any business from it. It was really just to help out. And the other thing was I was really proud of how we helped out with the Accounting for Bravery program through CPA Ontario. So that's helping the frontline healthcare workers with their personal taxes throughout COVID at no charge. And so really proud of that. I'd say the other big thing that I'm incredibly proud of is that because we work remotely, we're able to work from anywhere, right? And so we've been able to have our team members work in various countries in the last several years. And that's been unbelievably rewarding, because for myself, I wanted to go to California. I wanted, to do all these things, and I did. But we had some team members go to Philippines for a couple months, Australia for a couple months. I was in California for a couple months, BC for a month. We had one just recently go to London, UK, and in the summer we have another colleague who's going to Japan for a couple weeks, Germany for a couple weeks. Like, that's just not something that I thought would be possible a couple years ago, and it's just unbelievable to be able to do that for myself, but also for our team members to be able to do, right? So,
Right,
and
right.
and more recently, we're flying everybody out to Vancouver Island for a in-person retreat, because a lot of the people on our team we haven't met face to face. So because we're scattered throughout the country, so we thought it'd be kind of fun to do an in-person retreat in Vancouver Island. Yeah.
Hey, you're a lot taller than I thought you were.
Yeah.
You know, that's a great success. Realizing that this is what the staff and yourself want to have in a business, and it builds that loyalty that, within not only the staff, but when your clients hear about this, wow, you guys are really doing a lot for your,
Mhm.
not only the community, but internally. That speaks volumes. One of the successes also, Eric, we could talk about the Zen Books Awards. We don't have
Yeah.
to talk about dates. We want to make this, that people can review in the future. But
Right.
how did that come about, and what's the purpose of them?
Yeah, I mean, so this all kind of came from when COVID occurred, obviously, and we saw our own clients, just the way that they adapted and they shifted and just made things work in such unbelievable flexibility. And we were inspired by that. We thought that's unbelievable. Like, people need to be highlighted for the incredible flexibility and just like ingenuity behind business models shifting, right?
Hmm.
And we thought there's probably all these other businesses that are not clients that are also going through all of these crazy changes, and that we should be celebrating and be proud of. And so we decided, let's do some sort of award to congratulate them and to recognize that. And so we opened that up, and basically people submit. There's like a few questions that people submit, and basically the judges rate those questions, and we highlight each category. There's 9 or 10 categories, and from there people can win the grand prize. And so basically the whole point is that we want to create short videos and promote these small businesses, to basically promote the small business owner that's been so just smart in changing models and adapting. And so now is our second year doing this in 2022, I guess. But and basically, yeah, we're just excited to see what's going to come from it.
Only good things can come from it. When you're doing something like this, the initiative is shining the light on some of the hard working entrepreneurs out there. We don't do it for the recognition, and it's such an important part. So, congratulations to you and the team, and the other community stakeholders for creating the and continuing the Zen Books Awards.
Mhm.
So, on the flip side, Eric, let's talk about some of the lessons you've learned. Others call it failures. Would you care to share some iffy moments?
Yeah. I mean, we were at first, when we started growing Zen Books, we were taking on, any and every client at the time. Like, if it, and so that was a time of learning, figuring out what exactly is our specialty, and what is it that we're actually good at, and what is it that we actually want to do. So we took on, I'm sure every business owner has gone through this, where they've taken on a client they knew, didn't fit with the brand, didn't fit with exactly how they do things. But you want to make payroll, you want to make your
Yeah,
monthly
a gig's
targets,
a
and
gig.
a gig's a gig, and so yeah, those were not as great times as it is now. I think now we've kind of had the luxury of being able to make sure that we're getting clients that are on brand with like how we do things, and why we do things, and we create long-term partnerships. But yeah, at first the transactional nature of business was kind of a weirder kind of thing. But over time, as you establish your brand, you create more partnership with your clients over the long term, right? There's a lot more about relationships, and I think it's one thing to kind of say that, but then to experience it over time, that it's like, it's not transactional. It's about being our client's problem solver. Like, that's a just a
Mhm.
different mind shift. Yeah.
I'm really impressed, Eric. Throughout our conversation today on the podcast, I've heard time and time again the concept of community and working together, and what's doing best for our staff, and the branding. I live
Yeah.
and breathe branding. I mean, boy, the world would be a different place, and other people were to learn these types of skills. That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about collaboration earlier as well. But one of the things, with the philosophies we've kind of taken, is that as you kind of, I'm going to say, mature, you grow from being in a state of dependence upon your parents, and then you grow into teenagehood or whatnot, and you want to be independent of your parents, right, or of others. And then the next phase after that is interdependence. So it's about have being good at something, and having other people being good at something, and working together. And that's the next phase of maturity, right? And
Mhm.
so we've kind of taken the mentality that in business there's two main philosophies. So there's I'm going to say, the Donald Trump philosophy, that's shrewd and selfish, and then there's the collaborative approach, that's kind of like the Ben and Jerry ice cream, that's just fun, smart, helps competitors. Let's have fun doing our life. And that's the option we take, instead of being shrewd and selfish. Like let's live our lives, let's have fun, and make sure our staff are happy, our clients are happy, we'll be happy.
Yeah. Let's talk about being happy in about a year from now. Like, what's next
Mm,
for Zen Books?
yeah. Well, I mean, what's next personally? I'm getting married, so that's the
Oh,
first thing, a big priority in my life.
congratulations. If you need a band, let me know.
And yeah, I mean, there's also continued growth for our firm. We're continuing to expand, on the type of services that we're providing. So and also just on number of clients that we're taking on. So that's a big thing. We're investing a lot in advisory services so that our staff can provide more advisory services for our clients, because what we see is that there's a lot of small business owners who, basically you can do the monthly reporting is one thing, and we can do some cash flow projections, but there's a lot of business owners out there that really want those monthly KPI reporting, where it's key performance indicators and just advisory on growth and helping business owners grow, and not just getting a set of statements, but how do you have that conversation about growth with a small business owner. And so that's what we're investing in, is investing in the staff.
And that's the way to go,
Hmm.
because people often these days don't stay in a job for years anymore. But if you value your staff and you help them, and you like you said, you sometimes provide funding for some of their charitable, initiatives, it adds a lot of stability, and people
Hmm.
grow and businesses grow that way. That's
Yeah.
really smart.
I know there's that saying, the CFO kind of tells the CEO that, like, what if we invest in our staff and then they leave, right? And then the CEO responds that, what if we don't invest in our staff and they stay, right? Like, it's like, well, we should be training them so that they're great working with us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Eric, we're coming to the end of our segment today. Do you have any other words of wisdom for other small business or entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I would say technology needs to be your best friend to
Mm,
make your life easier as a business owner. So whether that's, on the computer or just technology, in your operations, if you ignore that, it will make your life way harder than it needs to be. And so if you don't know about it, you need to reach out to someone who does, because you will reap unbelievable rewards in your personal sanity and just personal well-being. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And these days, if you're not involved or know something about technology, your competitors do.
For sure.
Yeah. So, Eric, how can somebody get in touch with you, please?
Yeah, so they can visit zenbooks.ca. So that's ZENBOOKS.ca.
Well, thank you very much. So today, folks, on the Talk to the Fedora segment, we were joined by Eric Saumure, rather, from Zen Books. And I'm your host, Jarrod Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks, Jared.